greatest 200 meters ever. So this is a look at Yohan Blake's 200 meters, 19.26 back in 2011. He is the world 100 meter champion, and in this race he runs what is still to this day the second fastest time ever.
The moment has a better reputation over 100 metres. The moment has a
So you can just hear that he wasn't known as well for the 200 as he was for the 100. He's only 21 and a half. And as they line up for the race here, I'll do some brief pointers, because then we're going to take a really deep dive to understand why I believe this is actually the greatest 200 metre that has ever been run.
Side 3, side Enduro 4, Ashmead 5, Dix 6, Blake 7, Cirillo 8.
So watch as they come off the curve here. You're going to see Yohan Blake and Walter Dix together leading. Dix is in the lead at the moment, but as they come off the curve, Blake's just got him, and then he goes into another gear. He just screams away from him. And this is the fastest second 100 of any 200 metres that's ever been run. What we can do now is take a look at some of the context of this race, the history of it. Then I've got a deep dive into the step counts and the setup and the careers, and my arguments for why this is the greatest 200 metres ever. So I'm going to take a really deep look at this race, because I believe it's the greatest that it's ever been run for the 200 metres, but it's quite hotly contested. So you can see here, it still stands the test of time. It's the second fastest in the table here. I'm going to make the case that actually in terms of running, it was the fastest. And you can see we had Blake, but we also had Walter Dix. And just for reference of where we are here, recently we've had obviously Noah Lyles and Letsili Teboho and Arian Knighton. But prior to this, these guys all came after this race. Walter Dix had about the 4th or 5th fastest run in history. And in fact, I've got their careers here, so we can sort of see how Blake and Walter Dix collided on this day. Both were decorated athletes already, and Yohan is only 21 and a half years old. Walter Dix at the peak of his powers, 25 and a half years old. So a little bit of history about Walter Dix is obviously he's one of these guys who is a mega elite sprinter. His best ever in the 100 was 9.88. His best ever, which we just saw, and we're going to go into great detail for the 200, is 19.53. He was the bronze medalist for both the 100 and the 200 at the Beijing Olympics. And just a few days before, a week before, he got second place in the 200 metres to Bolt, finishing 19.40 at the World Championships in Daegu 2011. That's the championship that Blake won because Bolt false started. And so Bolt, in the end, in the final, looking to set a great time, although in horrible conditions, ended up false starting, and Blake took advantage. So that 9.92 is actually a lot better. I think it was into a headwind of 1.5 meters per second. It was cold, it was unpleasant conditions, and Blake came through to win the gold. So there are a number of things we're going to look at. Let's just go and take a look at that now, what I think drove Blake to such a great performance, also Walter Dix. But then we're going to look at that there is some speculation about this race, and that is that it is the worst reaction time you will ever see from a sprinter, I believe. We're going to look closely at that. But also we're going to look at the track, because many people think this is an exceptionally fast track because it has a very long, shallow bend, which we're going to look at. And we're going to see if that really makes the difference that people say. So firstly, let's look at the race. So as always, I've got the step count here. Now we watch them go around this. Now this is a long bit, which I'll show you next. But let's see, as they come to the straight. Now this is a 75-meter straight. Now, don't you see that change of gear there? They came into the straight level, and then Blake powers away. I really think that's worth looking at again. So here they are, approaching the straight, and you can see there Dix is slightly ahead, but now Blake starts to go, and he joins the straight slightly ahead, but now it's a straight up foot race between him and Walter Dix, two of the best athletes at the time, and he just destroys him, driven by Walter Dix's competition there, I believe. I think this is the crucial piece. Dix is getting dragged along by Blake. He cannot believe what he's seeing here, although he had just lost him in, everyone knew that Blake was a mega beast at the 100. But as they come around that curve, I really see that Blake has this, what can I say, just a straight up race now, Walter, and here we go, if you can live with me. And I believe at this time Blake knew that nobody could live with him, with of course the exception of Bolt, who wasn't running here, although he was in the crowd, and he comes out and congratulates Blake in a nice moment at the end. And this is an interesting moment here. Walter Dix walks down that tunnel, and as you'll see in a moment, that was quite significant. But first, we must settle the curve controversy. So what is the curve controversy? The curve controversy, which leads to a lot of conjecture and frankly outright nastiness on the internet, is that Yohan ran his race in Brussels on a track with a long, gentle curve and a 75-meter straight, whereas conventional 200-meter tracks, say at the Olympics, if you compare these two races here, we've got the 1919 of Bolt on the bottom and Yohan on the top, and watch when Bolt is on the straight and now Yohan's on the straight. So there's actually a short straight on Yohan's race as compared with what you could call a conventional track. Now, where does the controversy come in here? The idea is, therefore, that this Brussels track is a fast track because the curve is a shallower curve and it is harder to run a curve than it is to run a straight. And there's a lot of conjecture about what the differential of time is. So to address this shallow curve controversy, I've got a couple of different approaches. One of them comes from this great chart here that was in Total Running Productions when they were looking in red at Gout's fantastic and very exciting closing 100 meters. He ran 20.04 seconds in the 200, but he closed it with 9.36, which put him in the world-class category of closing 100s. Blake is the leader in this category. So Total Running Productions had this great discussion about this, and I collected that data and started to put it together with their best 200 meter times, also their best 100 meter times, just to sort of see what patterns I can see. So obviously we've got Blake's closing 100 is the best. Walter Dix is on the list, 9.48. Now the theory is that this is a shallow track, so we're looking for evidence that because the turn is less tight, you can run faster in the first 100. Well, it doesn't really show up for Yohan, and in fact by far and away the fastest opening 100 is from Usain Bolt when he ran his 1919. But really Bolt has to be taken out of the equation because he was otherworldly in those days. So Yohan doesn't really show up, but actually if you take Bolt out, we get a very fast first 100 from Walter Dix. So Walter does 10.05. It is the fastest, and so there is potential hint here that this is a faster track, but that's only 2 data points. And my contention is that the setup of the competition, the foot race that is set up as they round that curve, Dix can feel that Blake is right there. He obviously knows Blake because Blake is the world 100-meter champion. He's fighting to get ahead. He's fighting to see what he can do against this young pretender. And Blake puts his foot down, quite literally, and just says, right, it's a foot race, and he is compelled to race that final, certainly 75 meters along the straight. And Walter Dix is doing everything he can and is pulled along by Blake. So I think it's the competition that made this race what it was and made the times what it was. So another way to examine this is if we were to look at all of the data by venue. So I've taken a database of 547 200-meter runs under 20 seconds, categorized it by where they were run, and calculated averages. The overall average is 19.85. This is organized by frequency, the number of times we see it in the database. So it's quite lucky. We've got 24 observations in the database at this Bouwswin Stadium, Brussels. And it does have a fast average. And then what I also did was I calculated, it does have a fast average, but I also calculated the average against just up to stadiums with 6 runs or more, because as the data obviously thins out, you can see there's a number here with only 1 run, and we really don't want that to skew the average. So just arbitrarily took, right, you've got to have 6 runs, and I'm going to calculate that average there, and then I'm going to find the minimum. What's the fastest track? So, is this one the fastest track? No, it's not, actually. There's several faster. Look at that. We've got Zurich is faster. We've got Stade Olympique de la Ponte, Lucerne, bit of accent impersonation there, with a faster average. So it's, it doesn't stand out. It really doesn't stand out. And then I thought, well, okay, let's take Yohan out of the equation, because obviously we want to examine this without the effect of the second fastest, in my opinion, the greatest 200 meters ever, by taking a look without Yohan in the database. So we take Yohan out. He obviously ran at that track twice under 20 seconds, and we get another look. So now an average on 6 or more, it's slightly different, but basically 19.85. The new fastest track is another Olympic track, so meaning that the curve would be standard tightness, and it's actually Berlin. Another indication that it's to do with the competition, the level of athletes, what's on the line for them. I would imagine that average there is created by probably the World Championships or the Olympics, or maybe a mixture of the two. And so, there are comments online that this track gives you a 10th more or something, and I just don't see that in the data at all. Instead, I always see in the data that it's competition that drives amazing times. So now we come to the most remarkable feature of this race, the second fastest 200 meters by time, and it's quite famous because its reaction time for Blake was absolutely terrible. His reaction time was 0.269 seconds. The rest of the field reacted in somewhat normal time. Apparently Bolt for his 1919 reacted 0.13, so better than everybody in this particular race, and maybe the conditions were difficult. But nevertheless, he is far and away the worst reaction time. If we take the average of the other athletes here, and if Blake had just been average, never mind the best in that race, never mind matching Bolt, he runs 19.16. If he had had the best reaction time in that race, which was by Ashmead, he would have run 19.14, smashing the world record. And if he had had the same reaction time that I read that Bolt had for his 1919, he runs 19.12 seconds. He screamed down that back straight. He was in that foot race with Walter Dix. So let's go and take a look now and see how whether we can see that. Can we see? I mean, this should be visible, no? Let's go and take a look.
So here we are at the start. Back at the start, this is Yohan. There's Walter. Now, if we run this frame by frame very slowly, let's see if we can detect Yohan's terrible start. So here, watch here. See how, watch in lane, on the outside lane, I think that's lane 9. Watch here. Watch any one of these, and you can see Walter. If I'm looking at Walter Dix now, he's moving. Yohan is rock steady. Look at the outside lane now. Watch this. Outside lane is up. Yohan is still. What about over here? What about on the inside lane? Let's take a look. See, they're all moving. Oh, sorry, there's the inside lane there. Let's see there. See how everyone here is beginning to move out of the box, but Yohan is absolutely still. Now he starts to go, but you can see all the other athletes are ahead. Roll it back a little bit more. Now. So Yohan is now just rising up, and already in the outside lane, a step's been taken. Walter Dix is just about to take his first step, and you'll see he's ahead there.
So just to underscore just how incredible this is, here is a still of that. So here is Yohan Blake. He's completely unmoved. That's Walter Dix, and you can see he is up already. On the outside lane, lane 9, they're up, starting to run. But Yohan, you can see, look, his back is still down. He hasn't made any movement. Over here, beginning to, the hands have left the floor. So you can really see he was so slow. And if we go for an even closer look, now that becomes clear. There's the person on the outside lane. Walter is up, look. Walter's up, but Blake, if I take from his head, he is still yet to move and into their running. So, final couple of super looks here, just in case you aren't convinced, just in case I haven't made enough of a meal of this. Look. It's amazing. Why didn't he react? And, again. And finally, it was always getting too close. This is Walter. That's his head. And here is Blake. And here's what he's thinking. I don't know if anyone else does these with the line. But there you go. There's still asleep. Anyway.
So what I want to do is create a new Yohan who is slightly ahead of the game. He's in line with the others. So let's see if we can do that. So we create a new floating Yohan Blake here. And we see if we can't have him start in a reasonable time. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. So now you see how Yohan is now... Red Yohan here is reacting now with the other athletes down here. So now let's run that forwards and see how that begins to look.
So these videos are always fun but very difficult to make because the camera's constantly moving. So here we are on the back straight. Now I moved him ahead, and now maybe this is the best way to look at it. And you get a look at him crossing the line about a meter a bit ahead. It's all good fun, of course. And then this is the race. If you just run the two with one slightly ahead. I tried to make it so that he would finish about a meter and a little bit ahead. He might be too far ahead. But at the end, you actually get quite a fun look. Look at the massive number of athletes there. On the near side is the slightly faster reaction. There you go. He got there. Difficult to tell. Sort of echoes in time. But we'll close now by just taking a quick look at the rest of Yohan Blake's and Walter Dix's career after this. And you'll see the significance of that tunnel walk. So here we are back at their careers where they intersected. Walter Dix, a true great. But in the very cruel world of sprinting, you have to be the great of the greats to really gain the recognition you deserve. When you think about only the fact that to run in the 9.8s, I think only 54 athletes have ever done that. Walter Dix is one of them. He has one of the absolute greatest times in all 200 meter running history, 18th ranking. So Walter Dix is a true sprinting great. And I think this year he actually jumped a 7.39 meter long jump. So if we come back to the careers here, I want to show you what happens to both of them. So let's first focus on Blake. Blake goes into 2012 in screamingly good form. He ends up getting the silver medal at the 2012 Olympics behind Bolt. It's one of these. And then he runs, look, he's running consistently great 200s as well, and 19.4s, 19.54. He's just, he really is the beast. He really is the beast. And then you get the 9.69. That was at Lucerne. It was into a slight headwind. That is a genuine 9.69. There is some altitude there, so you can argue it up to 9.7. But that is, aside from Bolt, he is the fastest athlete ever. Tyson Gay ran a 9.69. Look at my video, the 9.69s. But Tyson Gay had a 2 meter per second tailwind. And in fact, Tyson Gay's true best performance was the 2009 second place when he lost to Bolt, finishing in 9.58. I think he ran 9.71. But now look here, 2012, and then 2013, there's no appearance. That there is Walter. And we don't see him in the database running below 10 seconds for 100 meters, or below 20 seconds for 200, again until 2016. And that's because in 2013, I think in April, he had a massive hamstring injury. And he has had a long career. And he came back fighting from that career. But it was obviously the case that he was never quite the same again. He was still elite. And he lasted elite for a long time, running, look at that, he's still in my database, he's nearly 33 years old. And that's when Gatlin just started getting going. So in the case of Yohan Blake, we really had his prime years stolen from us. And if that hadn't happened, I believe we would have seen even better times from Bolt. Bolt was driven by the competition. But now let's look at Walter Dix. He went down that tunnel, and in that 75 meters, he knew there was someone there on Earth who could just scorch him. And he makes one more appearance in the database in 2012, just getting under 10 seconds in the 100. But in the 200, that was his best time and his last time under 20 seconds. So I think I'll leave it there. I'll put, of course, on screen something slow, but I hope you found that a really good deep dive into why that is the real world record for the 200 meters. If you had a half decent reaction time, he gets 19.16. If he'd had the best reaction time in that race, 19.14, and if he'd matched Bolt's reaction time, he would have had 19.12. He really was the beast. Thanks very much.